This is what we call the Lenin room, because Lenin worked here for 1 year, between April 1902 to May 1903. Karl Marx never set foot in this library because it only became a library 50 years after Karl Marx died. But Lenin did work here. And the story is that Lenin was exiled by the Tsar of Russia to Siberia because of his revolutionary activity. He was considered too dangerous. And from there, he made his way to Germany. And then he was chased out of Germany and he ended up in London. The building here wasn't a library, it was the home of the 20th Century Press, which was the first or the main printing and publishing house for sort of socialist and left-wing publications in London. And the kinds of thing that they were printing was this. This is a page or front page from Justice from May the 2nd, 1903. And Justice was the newspaper of the Social Democratic Federation of Henry Hyndman, and the SDF was probably the first truly Marxist political party in this country. And the editor of the 20th Century Press was Harry Quelch, the man with the outrageous moustache in this photograph on the wall, and it was he who invited Lenin to work in this building for 1 year or 13 months between April 1902 and May 1903. Harry Quelch was a personal friend of Lenin. And when Lenin arrived here, he said to Lenin, "Why don't you share my office?" And you can see it's very small as it is. "Why don't you share my office and you can carry on editing and printing your revolutionary newspaper, Iskra, the Spark." And that is an original copy of Iskra from 1902 or 1903, and 17 issues of that were printed here, written here, printed here, and smuggled into Russia. In some ways it could almost be called the Lenin Memorial Library rather than the Marx Memorial Library, because as far as we know, Karl Marx didn't set foot in the building. Although interestingly enough, his daughter Eleanor Marx, she was connected with the London Patriotic Society that held its meetings here from 1872 onwards. The London Patriotic Society was a debating society that was connected with issues such as votes for women and the Fenian cause in Ireland. John Stuart Mill was one of its other prominent figures. Although the library was obviously founded in 1933 to commemorate the life and works of Karl Marx. The seat here is the seat we believe Lenin sat in, and the filing cabinet here we think was the filing cabinet in the room at the time, but the rest of the furniture we're less sure about. It's obviously of that period, but whether it was in this room or not, we're not sure. These are the collected works of Lenin in Russian. The remainder of the books are other items from our Russian language collections. But you have to imagine this room would have been piled high with papers. So nothing like as neat as it is now. It must have been really, really cramped. Most of the busts and sculptures in the room are quite idealised. Apart from this one here, which is a little bit less prepossessing than most of them, but in actual fact is probably the most interesting. This was sculpted by Claire Sheridan, who was Winston Churchill's cousin. Now that's slightly surprising because Winston Churchill hated communism and in fact sent British troops into Russia in 1918 to strangle the revolution of 1917 at birth. And yet there was his cousin, Claire Sheridan, swanning around Moscow in 1920, sculpting all the top Soviet leaders from real life. That included Lenin, Trotsky, Radek and Dzerzhinsky. They all sat for her. And the sculptures, these busts, were sold to raise money to support the revolution. Claire Sheridan was a very interesting, colourful character. She was Trotsky's lover for a while, and she wrote one of the best accounts of the revolutionary period, and we have copies of that book in the library. And the British intelligence services took a very close interest in her, suspecting that she was a Soviet spy.